what we saw was a mining company that screwed up.
Yes, absolutely.
That was terrible, but that wasn't everyday farmers.
No.
Farmers have been very respectful of this. So why exactly are they the ones being punished? Because it's something that a multinational mining company did. All of the profits of that mining company go overseas anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why are we being punished for it here in Australia?
Welcome, everybody who's come along. Give yourselves a big round of applause for being here. Thank you very much.
Come on, ladies and gents, come on in.
Everybody head on in. Oh, we're in a country town. Everyone's gone all shy on us.
Oh, Josh is in the house.
Fantastic. Right, now, I won't do the introductions. I'll let everybody basically go through, because we're doing things a little differently today.
Yeah.
Well, we have Derek, we have Shaq, we have the Shaved Monkey, of course, as normal. But I'm going to throw you straight to Derek. Derek, let's get into the show. We've got a lot to talk about today. So, an important event that's taking place after today's show. We're going to be doing, well, obviously a live broadcast of a particular meeting happening at 1 o'clock.
Cultural Heritage Act is a thing that come into effect as of the 1st of July a couple of days ago.
Right.
And
Derek's
really trying to get a better understanding of it, the farmers are, in how that affects them.
Well, here's a really important idea. Like, if you want to know what farmers are thinking, how about you go out and ask them, right?
Exactly.
Rather than make decisions in a room up there in the city, you've got to actually talk to the people it's going to affect. Yeah.
Indeed. And I think one of the biggest concerns too, feedback that people are giving me, is what kind of accountability measures are there in relation to an independent body who can make these rulings? And the farmers are seeking rulings from them if they are to come under this act and understand that. So there are a lot of uncertainties when people are going through this that have not been defined, have not been fully looked at.
Yeah.
And now it's legislation. And you wonder, what consultative process was actually engaged to bring it to this point. There's a lot of cries from someone like Nick Goron, who's a member of the Liberal Party, who's been calling out, if you read some of the emails, and even on this issue, the secretive nature of the Labor Party within Western Australia.
That's right.
And how much of this legislation has gone under the door, so to speak. And you're not hearing this coverage in local mainstream media in Western Australia.
Well, look, the relationship, let's be absolutely frank, between the corporate media and the Labor Party in this state is it's an embarrassment. It really is. It's basically just another arm of the West Australian Labor Party. So you won't get any counter view. You won't get any support. That's the problem. So, look, it's a wonderful thing that you gentlemen want to talk about this today. I really appreciate that. Obviously, to our audience here and those coming later on, because we'll obviously have a very serious meeting afterwards.
It really got my attention when people started saying to me, you're going to need a permit to dig deeper than 50 centimetres on your own land and soil.
It's a fence post. It's a fence post.
Yeah, and if you heard, and this is on properties greater than 1,500 square metres, and if you start thinking about that, I mean, I lived on a hobby farm of 5 acres for about 2.5 years.
Sure.
And even in that kind of space, you've got to dig trenches, you've got to make things happen.
Absolutely.
Pull out the tractor, even just to, in handling and getting rid of the remains of livestock and that sort of stuff. You've got to bury it somewhere, otherwise it's unhygienic.
That's right. I mean, look, even a really simple thing, well, not that a bushfire is simple, but a bushfire goes through and you lose your fencing. Certainly if you've got a larger property, you think even livestock getting out, and you can't just, life doesn't wait until you've gone and seen a committee or you've had someone come out. You have to act now.
What also got my attention was we interviewed Christine, who is a farmer. They've been on the land for 100 years, and one of the things that she highlighted in that, and it's one thing to read legislation, it's another thing to go out and talk to the locals and go, what are your thoughts on this? How's this going to affect you? And she highlighted the whole thing of how on earth are they going to know the history of her property, when it's been in the family for 100 years? Do they just make this up? And Shakeel and I were talking about this on the way in, the nature of this kind of legislation. And what you've got to understand is that in most religions, you have a book where the law is written down. And it's very clear, it's black and white as to what it means and what that process is. We're not getting that in this situation. It's so open to interpretation. in terms of, well, what can and can't you do if this is to be enacted?
Well,
I actually argue that it's actually worse than that, because in the first place, you legitimately own this land. You didn't steal it.
No,
You bought the
absolutely
land,
not.
and originally that land would have been sold to you by government.
That's right.
So if they come around and say you can't use any or even all of your property anymore, are you supposed to just wear the cost of that? If you've paid for that land, you own it.
You own it.
You've done
absolutely.
nothing wrong.
But
the government then changes the rules and says you're not allowed to use that property the way that you expected to,
absolutely.
and there's no appeals process. If somebody says this particular property, there's some spiritual significance to this property, how do you prove that there isn't spiritual
There's
significance
been
to
a
that
Heritage
property?
Act for the last 51 years.
Yeah.
So in the last 51 years, why have we not had all these claims? Okay, there's been plenty of time to do so. This, to me, is a power and cash grab, simple as that. And, you know, we really need to fire farmers up to stand up against it.
Look at how tricky the Labor Party has been. And I don't want to be partisan about this, but look at how tricky they've been with this, because they've actually streamlined the process slightly and made it slightly easier if you're on 1,100 square metres or less.
Yes.
Which is the majority of people that live in this state, because the majority of people live in Perth. If you're out in the country, you're gone. And what do you do? There's no appeals process. You can't go to the state administrative tribunal or any of those sorts of groups. You can't challenge it in the Supreme Court if somebody says, well, there's some spiritual significance to that, to that property. But also, even if you get your approval from your local LARC, and I've been reading up on all of this because I thought this can't possibly be correct, but even if you got the approval from your local LARC, they can change their mind about that later on.
Wow,
Now,
I didn't
let's
know
ask
that.
the question. How much later on?
Yeah.
Is that 10 years from now? Is it 5 years? Is it 1 year from now?
6 years.
Does it mean that they can just do it just after you've ceded the property?
Yeah, it's 6 years. It's that,
6
they've actually
years,
done that one. A couple of things
Yeah.
quickly. I've been trying to read it's 280 pages, and it's one of the things I find alarming is 2 weeks ago when I checked the legislation, it was only 269 pages, and now it's 280. So I'm kind of curious where those extra pages came from. First of all, if it's an emergency situation, you can't put in a fence post without asking for permission. It's a tier 1 automatically.
Define emergency.
Spot on. The risk of life or animals. So if something's a risk, so apparently, and this is in the workshop, my animals have no water, so let's sink a bore because it's an emergency situation. We've got to find ways to work around this.
So would a
but that's
water tank with a leak in it, would that qualify as an emergency? Because, I mean, let's face it, you need water out in the bush. You just can't turn a tap on.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you need a bore.
The problem with this, though, is you might be able to split hairs and find something, but we're talking about you going up against the government.
Yeah.
So if you're a farmer in the middle of the country,
You don't
you
have
might
time.
actually be correct on the law, but you might be tied up for 20 years in court trying to prove that you're
Spot on.
correct. And what will end up happening
100%.
is you will run out of money
Yep.
to keep fighting.
Now, there's a
Government
message
won't.
that's just come in from Josh here. Okay, basically, this will cripple farming and mining. Now, what is WA?
Well, no.
What is WA's economy built on here?
It's more than that. So it's not just farming, it's also property development as well.
course.
Don't forget about that, because all property development is immediately tier 3.
Sure.
So, like, we've got 1.2 million people coming into the country. Where are we going to find their homes? We've got to have property development to house all the increasing population. And it's not just the farmers that are getting screwed over, because we need to make the food. We've got to house people, and we've got to make stuff. Like, we're just...
Let me just ask a question here. Let's say that one farmer is First Nations. We'll go with the new politically correct term.
Sure.
So we've got First Nations farmers that are on land.
Hang on, I just need to clarify something. Is this the white First Nations or the genuine First
Who
Nations?
knows these days? But let's say you've got one lot that are on this land,
Yes.
and another tribe says, well, 2,000 years ago, that land was ours.
Right.
Oh, so
Who's going to win in that situation? Because one's going to say there is no spiritual or cultural heritage associated with that land.
Yep.
The other one says that there is. Who wins?
what happened? The land is it?
Well,
And by the way, that's already happening. The Balladura Noongar are arguing with and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. I think it's the Nudjuk Noongars from up near Geraldton. They're already arguing whose land Geraldton is.
So what process is in place? What judicial, legislative
Well,
review process is actually in place here?
No
I can't see
ombudsman.
one.
There's no ombudsman on this one. It basically comes down to you have to take it to court.
Yeah.
Right. And
but
You can take what to court? Because what's your legal challenge? What are you challenging? You got to go to court and say, I don't believe that this thing has Aboriginal cultural heritage
Sure.
associated with it. They say it's spiritual. what exactly is your argument? You don't have one. You've basically just had your rights taken away from you in one fell swoop.
And this is not the first time it's happened. We had the Waggle before, which quite frankly and I make jokes about it. The reality is the Waggle just appeared at very, very good real estate all the time, right? Okay, it didn't really appear in real estate that no one wanted. It was always, the old brewery places like that, okay, with the great values. Sorry to be cynical about it, but the reality is this legislation is so vague in places, it is just set up to be rorted.
Yep.
Of course, you don't think that people are going to offer the inspector or whatever they're going to call themselves, the elders, a bit of extra money under the table to turn a blind eye?
Of course.
What choice are you going to have? If you want something done, what choice are you possibly going to have?
Well, that's right. That's right.
For the people who know, the puppy died, and then we had a petrol station. So it's already happening. The whole system has been wrought with bullshit. Now, I do have to make a few quick shout outs to a couple of people. I can see Tom and his wife here. I can also see Arthur's just rocked up. These are some of our friends from Perth that have made the trip all the way out to Wagin to support this.
Massively
I think that's absolutely huge. So,
well, this is the thing. Okay, this is not a country versus city argument or issue here, right? The fact is, this is talking about your food supply for your entire nation, and the whole thing about making it 1,100 square meters or whatever the meters is to separate and to, quite frankly, for the Labor voter in the suburbs not to be affected or not to see themselves as being affected by it. But ultimately, by putting this division between country and city, you are cutting off your food supply. You are cutting off, and you are, when we're talking about families here, when we're talking about family farms, we're talking about leaving them in a vulnerable situation where ultimately they're going to be bought out. Okay, that's the big thing. Corporations going to come in and buy them out because financially, how the hell are you going to fight this? You can only do it at a corporation level.
And I said this last week on the show that what you'll find is a consolidation, and you'll see big corporations come in.
That's right.
Because do you want to go and buy a farm today? Right? Does anybody here want to go buy a farm today?
Not now.
Because you're too worried about what's going to happen in the future and what you're actually going to be allowed to do on your land.
Spot on.
Right?
Yep.
So a big corporation comes in and says, well, I'll come in and I'll buy all this farmland up. And by the way, some of these rules don't really work for me. But because I'm a big corporation, hey, government, can you give me an exemption?
Absolutely.
And they get them every single time.
State
the rest
agreements.
of us are struggling to comply.
And the way they get those exemptions is they're called political donations. So what are you supposed to do with that? We've legalised the so-called corruption. I can't call it corruption because it's now legal, but how's a farmer compete with that?
The other thing I think is worth noting is there the suggestion at the moment that farmers have been deliberately digging up artifacts and things of cultural significance? What we saw was a mining company that screwed up.
Yes,
okay?
absolutely.
That was terrible, but that wasn't everyday farmers. No. Farmers have been very respectful of this. So why exactly are they the ones being punished? Because it's something that a multinational mining company did. All of the profits of that mining company go overseas anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why are we being punished for it here in Australia?
Well, to me, it's not about punishment. It's about taking away control, taking about the ownership of these farms away so corporations can move in. This is a globalist thing, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole. It's not where I'm going here. But ultimately, this is all about money and power, really, really simply. If you take the power away from the individual, the corporations are going to have a massive free run to purchase land, and quite frankly, they'll buy that at devalued prices because it's a hard thing to sell, right? And then we're going to get, again, control of the food supply. We're going to get less and less mum and dad businesses, mum and dad farms, and family farms are going to be able to be run. It's financially not viable.
I'd like to hear from Travis because there's been a bit of an update since we went to air last on this. You went up to Geraldton with a big meeting there. What have you got to report from your findings in terms of attending that meeting?
Oh, because I didn't go to the Geraldton meeting. I actually went to the Northern one.
Okay, this is a meeting that was by the government to educate us as to what this.
So on the 28th, that's the one. Shaq's got the paperwork here. So we've actually got one of the copies of the handouts that they said there's extracts out of the legislation. There's all this sort of stuff, and they're running through a whole heap of stuff that you can and can't do. So that's where the information about if it's an emergency, you can dig a well, a bore, and all that sort of stuff. So one of the things I'm finding, a lot of the stuff that's actually listed in the Act itself, they were saying doesn't apply. Like a prime example of that one is like-for-like activities.
Sure.
So to a farmer, a like for like generally is putting up fences, harvesting, ploughing the field. So they were saying you can do like for like activity. So if you ploughed it in the past, you can plough it now. If you dug it down to 800 millimeters, so 80 centimeters, you can do it again now. But the thing is, like, that's not what's said in the legislation.
But also, let's be technical here, and I'm not a farmer, but what if you're growing a different crop to the crop that you grew last year? Is that like for like, or is that now a change?
Exactly. And the
Exactly
other one
right.
is, the thing
That's the
is,
problem.
they're saying if a fence goes down, you can build another one on. And I was talking to another farmer, he says, so hang on, we had a fence in this paddock 35 years ago. Does that mean I can build another fence in this paddock? Like, where's the cutoff?
Yeah, there's no time limits that I can see in the legislation. I haven't gone into the depth you have, but
There's more. There's
Oh.
a hell of a lot more. So for the farmers that are in the audience with us now, because like I said, we're doing the event afterwards where
Yeah.
we're actually getting the farmers to talk to us. So for the people watching now online, Josh and a few others there, please make sure you share this on your group so people can hear the actual truth about this. So the biggest thing that I found alarming is the access to the property. A lot of people think is once you make a application to have your land investigated and all that, that's when they can gain access to your land. No, they can come anytime they want.
and they can video and they can do audio recording. Like, what an invasion of your privacy! Like, what is going? When did we become 1984 of the farming community?
Because
This
you
is
just
without
imagine-
warrant. No warrants
Sorry?
are required.
You just imagine, because as people probably know, I'm involved in horse
Coming in,
racing
guys.
and greyhound
Come on
racing.
through.
Yes,
Okay, we've seen animal rights activists go onto farms, take animals,
That's
do all
right.
sorts of things. We can't see that that's going to be something that they'll use to get in
of course.
onto your farm, and you can't do anything about it. Just come back to the process here. So the legislation very cleverly says if there is no Aboriginal cultural heritage, you don't actually need to get the permit. But what you're going to need to do to establish that you don't have any is to do a due diligence plan. But it doesn't tell you what the due diligence plan is or how to do one.
Yeah.
It is in the legislation.
Oh, okay.
No, that legislation, it gives you this whole big drop-down box. I read through it on the plane
Oh,
on the way
it's
over
insane.
here. It's awful.
So what you need to do, so let's say there's no larks in your area. So they're the people that are the one-stop shop
Okay.
for everything you need. So then, because there's no larks, you've got to go to your native title organisation. So, but yet when I asked the question out northern, I said, how is this act going to interact with the native title, considering that WA has already paid $750 million for most of the southwest WA? Oh, no, it's got no interaction
Correct me
with
if I'm
the
wrong, did
Native
that-
Title Act.
Did that work out to be about $100,000 or something, $150,000 for each person?
If my memory serves
Less.
me
There's
correctly,
30
like
at the time, because this number is constantly going up.
Yes.
More and more people are ticking the boxes. At the time, there was 30,000 Noongars in WA. That was the census. This is
Sure.
government's figures, not mine. So using that basis per family is about $130,000 to $150,000. But yet we still have homeless Noongar people. Tell me, how does that work? Like,
Well,
come
we
on.
obviously need to give
You
them
can
more.
buy, we purchased
Obviously.
2 units. We've got 2 duplexes for $70,000 in Geraldton. And this is a heartland of Noongar communities, but yet, no, we've got homeless people. Like, this is the level of waste that the government is
this
doing.
is
It's
virtue
insane.
signaling. You just keep throwing money at it, right? Throw our money at it, okay? Ultimately, this is and I don't want to be us and them, but the reality is here, okay? We've got farmers are basically being penalised because we've got politicians who want to be seen to be do-gooders because they want to buy votes. This is about buying votes for them, keeping themselves in power, and obviously keeping that going. That's the reality.
So we do have more people coming in, which is absolutely amazing.
Very
So
much
keep on
appreciate
coming,
that.
ladies and gents. So this is being streamed live to the Edge Radio Facebook page. And also for ladies and gents who are watching online, I'm seeing you all there. I see the hearts and the ticks and the comments and stuff like that. Please do share it with all your organisations or your friends, your groups and all that, because these messages need to get out there.
Absolutely.
Now, the bit of all the legislation that from what they actually told us at the Northern event versus what's actually in the legislation, they said absolutely nothing about the jail time for people who actually breach the Heritage Act.
So
So
it needs to be talked about.
if you do not get a permit and they deem that your offence or damage to Aboriginal cultural land is severe enough, you can spend up to 5 years in jail.
But
That's
there's
it.
no review of this. Again,
No.
I've got to keep hammering that point.
Yep.
There's no way for you to review that, and so it doesn't have to be a physical item. That's why this due diligence plan, it doesn't have to be something that you can physically see. They can
it can-
simply say it has some spiritual significance,
Absolutely.
and you're gone. The other thing to note here, if you just read what it says here in the fact sheet, it actually says here that they're going to that they're setting up the LACs to be a local regulatory agency.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, regulatory agencies in any other type of environment are going to be answerable back to the legislature.
Of course.
They're answerable back to the executive.
Yep.
Okay. And ultimately, if you have a problem with that, you can challenge it in court. But you can't challenge this because there's nothing to challenge it on.
Yes.
You can't prove that the thing doesn't exist.
That's right. You know, it's the old hopes and dreams. How the hell do you prove something exists when you can't physically touch
So
it?
potentially we could be looking at somebody going to jail for 5 years.
Yep.
And when they go to jail, and someone says to them, well, what did you do? And you say, well, I planted a few trees
Yeah.
on my property, and as I have done for the last 50 years, and I don't know what I did.
Yeah.
But this is crazy to just
It
say
is
that.
Oh, yeah.
But
What are you in
it's-
for?
well,
I
it's
grew some
getting worse.
mandarins. Come
I'd
on,
like
that's
to know
ridiculous.
what happened in the caucus meetings, because obviously at the moment it's a one-party state at the moment.
Absolutely.
I blame the Liberals for that, not the Labor Party
Yep.
for it. But that's what's happened at the moment. So surely there must have been some pushback within the Labor Party on this.
I highly doubt it. So, in my experience with politics, it seems that all the politicians are actually just puppets for the power brokers behind the scenes. So, personally, I think this is actually coming from the power brokers within the Labor Party. They wanted this.
So who
But-
do you think's benefiting from?
Oh, Ken Wyatt.
Well, no, but that's one. Yeah, that's one person. But who do you think overall? Because we've talked before about corporations now.
Sure.
You know, having the ability to navigate these rules in a way that the everyday person can't. Who do you think is going to benefit as a group?
Okay. My honest feeling,
Tinfoil hat answer or the normal answer?
It's your show, buddy.
the inside of my head is lined with tinfoil at the moment. How I'm seeing it, honestly, I see China buying up our farms.
No,
I do. I see China buying
This
up
is
our
the
farms.
World Economic Forum through and through.
Yeah, no. Look, do you think they're not related?
Yeah,
Seriously?
So I think this is so. A lot of people blame China for buying most of the land in Australia.
Yep.
It's actually not. It's the UK and the US.
Okay.
So they own insane amounts of our land, and in the UK, I think Netherlands is one of the places that was their main food producers. They're running out. They've got that many migrants coming into the country. They need food from somewhere. And now at the moment, a lot of our produce is actually used internally,
What
and
are
then
your
we're
thoughts here?
exporting.
Don't worry,
based on
guys.
that.
There's always crickets. You can eat your crickets and you can eat your bugs, and they're all. You can get them at the service stations now. You'll be right.
I know. Absolutely.
So let's just come back to that. So you're right that the US buys up a lot of our farmland, but why? Because how many small farmers do you see in the US? You've only got about 5 major companies that basically control US agriculture, and if you've got a small farm, you don't really get to sell much unless you sell it to one of those big 5
That's
guys. Right, same thing that's happened in the banking industry, same thing that's happened with many other industries around the world. So what you're seeing is an international consolidation, right? Why limit yourself to only owning farmland in America? Why not buy it in Australia? Why not buy it everywhere? But in the meantime, you're seeing families that have been living on these farms for generations, that have not done anything wrong,
That's
who
right.
have just, with one fell swoop, had their rights taken away with unclear and ambiguous legislation.
Well, my thought on that is, and I said the China thing before, and this is just, look, the reality is we have seen over the last few years, Mark McGowan, with the retrospective changes to laws, all sorts of things which have been completely uncalled for, completely lacking in ethics. And the reality here has been allowing China to have complete control of this state, right? And to my mind, I see that as the great threat. I see that as the money coming in. They're controlling a lot of the mining. If they're controlling the farming, well, if they control the farming, they control the people because you've got the food source. Simple as that.
Australia's in an interesting position when it comes to the relations with China because, of course, they've got also the United States and the tensions between those nations,
Yes.
particularly when, of course, the sanctions were going in under the Trump presidency there. And those were directly affecting farming and farming produce in many cases. So it's a two-way lever here of politics that I think Australia is going to have to really rise up in terms of its own independence and go, what way do we want to forge? Which way are we going to go? Rather than just playing the whole neutrality thing all the time, what your cake and eat it.
That's why we have to have people in this hall. This is why people have to step up. Everyday Aussies have got to step up and say no, right? Because let's face it, those who are gaining, your particular billionaires in town, they're gaining massively out of all of this. They've got their piece of the pie. It's the everyday Aussie who gets smashed, and ultimately, we've got to show there's a lot more of us than there is of them, and we need to get our numbers, consolidate, and use our power. And we're not seeing that.
To be fair, Gina Reinhardt has been critical of the.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to read you
Both her and Twiggy.
the first
Very good.
page here, though, or the first paragraph here. A key
Can you-
principle of the new ACH Act is to prioritise the values held by Aboriginal people in relation to their cultural heritage when planning and managing land use activities that may cause harm. So the key principle is to prioritise that. not to prioritise the food security of our nation, not to prioritise our freedoms or anything like that, but to prioritise one small group of people over everybody else.
It's insane.
Does that make sense to anybody?
No, I don't know about you, but I've actually read the Anti-Discrimination Act. It's not just, oh, you can't do that because you're this colour. It's also going, hey, you're this colour, so let's give you the job. Let's give you this only because of you're that from that one
we've
group.
just had 3 years of losing our civil liberties because of the greater good. For the greater good, okay, the large part of the population. So we're now going to swap that and just give it to, whatever the current percentage is, if it's, 1.9 or 2.9. This is ridiculous. The majority of Australians, right? This is not good for the majority of Australians. We should be doing that. Now, Labor Party, who theoretically is for the working people, right, is showing that no, they're not. They are for sale and they have sold our sovereignty. We have to stand up against this. There's so many ways. We've discussed that and we'll discuss obviously further after 1 o'clock. But there are so many loopholes in that. There's so much vagueness. And then whenever there's vagueness, if you've ever, anyone in this room, I'm sure we've all dealt with lawyers, right? Lawyers will look for vagueness. They will look for a loophole. Okay, there's a great saying as far as I'm concerned. What would you do? All right.
Sorry, Derek used to work in a law firm, so
That's all right. Okay. Well, what do you call 100,000 lawyers?
I'm not a lawyer.
The ocean?
It's just
A really good start.
Damn right. Absolutely. Okay. The thing is that these are the people who are going to gain from it, and there's going to be the Aboriginal industry. Okay, and it's not Aboriginal people. I get bloody passionate about this because there's a lot of really great Aboriginal people out there who are living in squalor, having a really hard time. These are not the people who are going to be protected. These are not the people that are being looked after. These are the people who are going to lose more out of it. It is the Aboriginal industry, and this must be stopped.
the token Aboriginals, the ones that are white who ticked a box.
Now, you stated before about putting fences in, that the Act says like for like you can replace a fence. Doesn't actually quite say that though. It's not just about the depth of the fence.
Sorry, that was my computer.
Sure it was.
It's the Labor Party, they're listening in.
I love Zing
It's not
King.
just about the depth of the fence, it's also the height of the fence.
Yep.
This is really interesting because if you put a fence in 30 years ago, it may have sunk a little bit. So now you're going to put a new fence in. If your new fence is 10 centimetres higher than the old fence, well, you're in breach of this Act.
Spot on.
So now you're going to go get an approval from somebody.
And if you don't, potentially 5 years jail.
That's
5
right.
years
Oh,
in jail.
and if you're a business, it's $10 million.
Of course.
And as far as I know, like the farmers in the audience here can tell me for sure, how many of you guys are actually set up as a business, not operating underneath your personal name?
Silence.
Yeah, a few hands, absolute crickets. Because
And if you're not set up that way, please go get some financial advice.
Absolutely.
Tax advice. Undertaking a due diligence assessment in accordance with the code may be used as a defence to the charge of an offence that activity has harmed. Maybe. So it may not be. You can go in there and say, look, I did what you said. And they go, yeah, you did what we said, but we're still going to lock you up.
May is a beautiful word. It's just
it's
got
a great
lot-
month. It's a great month.
A lot of
It's a bit
scope.
warm, not too hot, not too cold.
Hey, just because we obviously got people online who are talking, and I very much appreciate this. I just want to throw a couple of things forward. We've had no Labor politician will cross the floor. None of them have in the last 40 years.
They're not allowed to. This is
You're,
one of my
you're
biggest
supposed to
problems
click
with
on
the
it
Labor Party.
so that everyone watching
If you're
online
ever
can see.
tempted to
look, you do the
vote for Labor in your federal elections, just remember they're not allowed to cross the floor. So your
That's right.
local member doesn't represent you.
That's right.
Your local member may at most only represent you in a caucus room debate, but whatever the head office says is what goes. So if you're voting for Labor in your local election, I'm talking about federal politics here, if you're voting for Labor federally, the leader of the Labor Party nationally is who you're voting for. Your member has absolutely no say whatsoever.
Agreed. Agreed.
Now, if you aren't curious about that, when people do cross the floor, like there's been a few Liberal senators that's done it over the last few years, they're actually facing disendorsement for the upcoming federal election.
And disendorsement means they lose their funding for the re-election, right? Which basically
Not that. They're no longer a candidate.
No, but if they well, that's true.
But that's not automatic. It's not automatic with the Liberal Party.
Yeah, they
Pretty
go
close.
The Liberal Party got very upset about this in the Senate when they blocked supply with Gough Whitlam,
Sure.
right? Because some of the Liberals said that they were going to cross the floor.
Yep.
Okay, but it's not in the Constitutional Liberal Party. You can cross the floor. And in fact, John Howard crossed the floor while he was the Prime Minister at one point against Tony Abbott.
There you go.
So, it does happen. It's rare, but
Sure.
it does happen. But the fact of the matter is that you can do it in the Liberal Party, you can't do it in the Labor Party.
Look, ultimately, it's great to say you're non-partisan, but I sit here and I see so much socialism. And I see so much control, and it seems to be attached to a particular party. And I quite frankly, I see them as the enemy of the people now. And as I say, the being a party that's supposed to support the worker, it's just such a lie. It's such an unbelievable lie. It's just been the greatest bit of marketing in the last 50 years.
And the most important comment that came through out of all of it, yes, I am wearing a Fremantle beanie, and yes, my grandfather used to play for South Fremantle, so go stick it. I don't care. I'm wearing
There
the
you
Go the Freo. We'll never win a premiership, but I still love them anyway. I hate to say it, the Eagles this year have a greater chance of winning the premiership than we do. That's how terrible we do in finals. So,
Well, do you need to get a permit now to put a footy post in the ground?
Oh, yes. Look at that.
hey, Derek, let's keep this Australian. Put an Aussie flag in the ground. We need a permit.
Oh, but on that front, okay, this makes me very angry. I have a shirt. Okay, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but I like my colourful shirts. This man, knocks me around on this one. But I have an Aussie flag shirt, right? And I have worn that out because I'm bloody proud of my country, right?
Even though you're Indian.
Even though I am, yes, I'm half Indian, right? But I'm proud of half of me. There you go. No.
The other half wants to wholesale everything.
Have I got a deal for you, right? He's completely lost my train of thought. I have been literally called racist for wearing my flag on my body. That's ridiculous, and not once or twice. It has happened far too often.
But there's a heap of people that want to destroy
I
that
still
flag.
get called racist all the bloody time. So the amount of times I've been called a white supremacist,
It's obvious.
always gobsmacked by that one. But I still have this question though. With this ACH rules. So if an Aboriginal person wants to build a house, they need to get a permit from another Aboriginal person. Is that how it works?
It depends which tribe.
What if you're a Sydney Aboriginal that's flown to Perth and you've decided to build a house, but your great grandparents were originally from here, and you say, well, that doesn't have a cultural significance. If there was an argument between them, how does that argument get resolved?
And
resolves it.
And hang on, we're now taking
Just get spears out or something. What do you do?
on the flip side, we're taking all of these communities, okay, which are all individual tribes, or mobs, okay, and we're calling them all Aboriginals, and we're throwing them under the same blanket. This is it is racist. It's ridiculous.
So I've got family on one side of the houses in Geraldton, and we had a Yamaji family on the other side. So every weekend it was World War III in our street. Right, police, the whole works.
What were you like, the United Nations
No,
peacekeeper in the middle of the two?
He's Poland, like sheltering covered between Ukraine and Russia. But
Okay.
So what happens? I actually spoke to policemen about it, and I said, "What the hell? Like, have you guys even heard of this?" They have no idea. And Patricia is actually an elder. So you'd think she'd be all over this, but they have no idea what's going on. Like, they're absolutely oblivious.
You made the comment, Aaron, about socialism. The thing is that even if you had lost your mind and decided to be a socialist, right, and you actually thought this was a good idea, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it supposed to help everybody? What you're doing is you're punishing the people that have worked
Yes.
in order to support the people that aren't working, and you're actually making sure you're taking away their ability to want to do anything. Right? In a lot of cases, it's actually not in their interest to do anything. If you're in New Zealand and you're getting $700 a week for not working, it's not in your interest to go and work because you're going to lose money doing it.
Yeah,
Especially considering how cheap everything is over there compared to Australia.
Exactly.
Like, why would you work?
Absolutely. But this is the whole problem. And so even if you are a socialist thinking you're doing something good, when you realise that you're not doing something good, you've got to stop doing that.
But socialism goes to a point, right? Okay, it's kind of
Come on in, guys.
It's your soft introduction to a dictatorship. That's what it is. Okay, it's a part of the path.
Well,
We got some Eagle supporters in the house.
What was soft about this legislation being introduced?
Oh,
I don't recall,
nothing
and
really.
granted, I don't live in Western Australia anymore, and I don't even live in Australia anymore. But yeah, I do keep up with stuff.
Of course.
I never saw this being debated before the election.
No.
Well, why
Did any
would
of
you?
guys hear any of this?
Hang on, the last election, they put up Kirkup, who was basically just a lame duck there. set up
Spineless
to fail.
jellyfish.
Yeah,
Come on,
absolutely.
let's be
There
right.
to fail. The last election was a joke, and the Liberal Party made no attempt to win it. In fact, they threw sacrificial lambs out there. That's what happened. The Labor Party walked all over them because they had every opportunity to.
Well, it was a fear-based election. It was all about COVID and border lockdowns and all that sort of stuff. And people were voting out of fear than anything rather than actually facts. And this is, I think, where we're hearing now is what are the facts on this? And it's just so vague. It's just so unknowns. But you've got to have accountability in anything you do.
That's
and
right.
this is the biggest concern I have, that there is the leading ruling body of this legislation. Who and what are they accountable to? at least if you have an election, the ones that are elected, the politicians, are supposedly, in theory, to be accountable to the people who elect them. That's why they're called public servants.
Yep.
But in this case, is this body, who is it serving? Is it serving itself?
Yeah.
Is it serving the public? And this is what you've got to do in politics at all levels,
Absolutely.
is you are serving the publics, which means that you put your own agendas aside.
Spot on.
Unfortunately, this country, and I don't want to go into a Republican argument here, but this is my feelings on it.
Right.
This country seems to still operate with the idea that politicians are actually there to impose governance upon us,
Yes.
as opposed to that they are there to serve us. There's a
Well,
big
that's-
difference fundamentally
that comes
between
back-
how we operate in this country and how, say, the United States operates,
Sure.
or even how the UK operates.
Okay.
So that's a really big deal, because the politicians, we look at Parliament, right? Why don't we have a Bill of Rights?
Yeah.
Why don't we have a situation where the Parliament can actually be answerable to the judicial branch?
Sure.
Well, the answer is because Parliament voted that their right to do anything should be unlimited.
Yeah.
Now, in no other country that I'm aware of, and certainly in the Western world, is that the case. In every other country, Parliament's ability to impose their rules is actually subject to restrictions on law. But that's not the case in Australia. So technically speaking, it would actually be legitimate for your local politician to say, I'm not here to serve you. And some of them have been saying that recently.
Well, and look, if we go right down the theory, the reality is this comes back to our convict past, right?
Your convict past.
Half your
half,
convict.
yeah, exactly right.
You sold that the
I
half.
did. Exactly. Got a great price.
So I'm just aware of the time, because we do actually have the farmers event coming up after this in about 10 minutes. So what I want to do is just quickly wrap up and just have a look, talk to everyone on this panel here, just say some of the things that they'd like to see done for this to actually try and help these farmers out. The first thing I want to see is a cap on how many, like, let's say we pick a date 12 months in the future and say, right, there's no more sites from that date forward. Because at the moment, New Zealand did it with the Treaty of Hohapawatiwiti or whatever they the American Indians done the same thing. The natives up in Canada did the same thing. They had an expiry date on all of this. You can't have any more native sites after this date. If you want to claim one, you have to put in by that date. After that, no more. So at what point do we say enough's enough?
We have to put an end date on it. It has to have an end date. And quite frankly, they've had 51 years. 51 years to get this done.
Yep. And in the last 3 years alone, it's gone up 20,000 native sites.
Of course it has.
So
I think there needs to be more accountability in terms of how much public monies, taxpayers' monies, has gone into native title. Where is it? Where is that money? How come it's not getting to the people who need it on the ground? And then there needs to be, at the second level, of what have we done to actually think through the process in terms of this legislation? There is none of that. There is no consultation here. And I don't think, I don't, in terms of the farming, they're not wanting to be anti-native title. It's not like they don't reserve or respect the culture of the native title of our indigenous people. It's because they're just going, hang on a second, we have a responsibility to provide food and to turn the economy over for our nation. How are we going to do that? You're making it more and more difficult for us to do. And you're taking away our. I think we've got to get back to a point in what we do in this country of punishing people for doing the right thing. We don't just do it in this kind of a situation as well. We do it across our taxation system. You teach kids, work hard and do what, and you'll do well. Well, why do we have a tax situation where the better you do, the more you're taxed? We've got to look at ourselves as a nation and say, hey, get over the tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah,
we really,
definitely.
really do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say I would like to see us actually put this issue at some level, at some point, at rest.
Yeah.
So we need to have a resolution. Now, personally, I think that we probably should have a treaty like most other countries have,
Right.
and we should be having those sorts of conversations. In relation specifically to this act, the fact of the matter is the government's saying we're going to have a light touch for 12 months. Bullshit. Yeah. What they're really saying is we're not set up yet to do this.
That's right. We're not ready.
So
Absolutely.
what they need to do, in my opinion, is Roger Cook should have done this, is delay the rollout for long enough for people to understand it properly, for farmers and other members of the community that are going to be affected to be able to say, these are the unintended consequences
Correct.
that you're going to impose on us, so they can be a sensible way to move forward.
Okay.
But we also want to have a solution that is a solution that gives people certainty, so we're not going to be sitting here in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years' time and having the same conversation again.
That's right.
Well,
And
you've got a
people
few
have said-
fans there, Shaq. I'm seeing the comments come through, so bravo and absolute freaking lutely. So, well done, Shaq. Oh, either way, it's about time this was actually done. So, we're starting to fill this hall up in case people can hear the noise in the background, which is awesome. We might actually have to open those doors to allow more people to come in. And for the people who are watching on the stream, we will have a live Zoom link for you to watch the actual meeting itself. I'm really, really impressed with how many people come up because we weren't sure. We thought might be 10, might be 50, might be 100. We had no idea. So this is awesome. And we do have some other really awesome speakers. There's one over there. He's just snuck in, so we'll introduce him later. So I think it's about time we wrap this up, gentlemen. You'll be able to watch a replay on Edge Radio Australia. And for people in the crowd, if you do want to have a look at this or get the video, it's on the YouTube, Facebook, edgeradioaustralia.com, and it's also on my personal one and Aaron's personal Facebook pages as well.
For sure.
So, any last notes, gents?
No, just thanks for doing this, and also being a voice, Edge Radio Australia, for covering something that is not getting the publicity that it actually deserves, and will affect so many people in our backyard who put food on our table every night. Thank you for highlighting this and being the platform for that.
Appreciate that.
And one final thanks.
I'd follow that up as well and just say, it is really important. Thank you for giving the farmers a voice because they're often forgotten about, they're often ignored, and the Labor Party especially ignores them, and to some degree the Liberals do. So without the Nationals, nobody represents
To
them.
me, life is about your ethics, right? Okay, and end of the day, we all go out in the same size box, okay, and sticking to your integrity and your ethics while you're here. These are wonderful people who are literally feeding us, okay, if they deserve our support. And it's disgraceful that the corporate media don't actually stand up for the farmer.
Your box will be a little bit bigger than my box.
And let's remember the old line as well in business: don't bite the hand that feeds you, right?
Yeah, right, absolutely.